Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pull Focus, the cinema-based entertainment podcast where a couple of freelancers come together to talk shop. My name is Mike, and as always, I am joined by my brother in crime, a man whose presence is so soundful it's deafening. A man who has a heart of gold, but a soul of metal. A man who's so kind that, if necessary, would not only lend you an ear, he'd lend you both. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Andrus. Keep it coming. Keep it coming, everybody.
You all is me waving on my adoring hand. Yes, thank you so much
Everybody.
for that. That's a very warm. Oh, yes, the secondary standing ovation.
They're just not, they're standing on the balcony, too. Oh, man, we're filling the balconies now.
Thank you all so much. I do have a very important message to share today, and that is...
Yes? Oh, no. Oh, no, I can't hear him. I can't... Hello? Oh,
and
my
that
gosh.
is the meaning to life.
Oh, thank God. All right. Oh, my goodness.
And that is the sound of silence. And the meaning of life.
It's also the sound of me having a panic attack if you were to keep doing that. Oh, my gosh, you're freaking me out.
Did you not see me mute myself?
I did. I'm playing along. It's awesome.
Wonderful. Oh, you're playing along for our adoring fans.
Our adoring fans. Also, heads up on that. I was checking the YouTube profile. Andrus, we are up to 13 whole people who regularly listen to the show. So once more, congratulations to you.
I don't know if you can clarify that it's actually 13.
It's actually
consistent listener.
It might be 5 people who just found us by accident, and the rest is just like multiple accounts that I've made, so we can fill up.
Your mom and my mom, they're like, "Ooh, that's nice."
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Hey, my mom is not afraid to critique our little podcast on this side of the earth. I'll tell you that. But anyway, yes, guys, it's so good to be speaking with you once more, as usual, because of. We are living within the pandemic, and we are living. We're not just surviving, my friends. We are living within the pandemic. Of course, Master Andrus over here is going to be talking to us through the wonders of the internet. Actually, now you're farther away than usual. Where are you calling from right now, Andrus?
I am currently in lovely Las Vegas, Nevada.
Nevada.
And Vegas is kind of scary.
Yeah, I'm by itself.
During the pandemic, it's kind of a scary place.
I think we were talking about a little bit before we started rolling about how I think that if there was ever a time for Hitchcock to be alive and to actually do a biography, we're living in the Twilight Zone right now for sure. And Vegas has got to be such a weird kind of alternate dimension right now with so many things under lockdown, and unfortunately a lot of businesses that are failing out there because that is the industry and everything around the Strip. I mean, I would be weirded out for sure.
Well, I mean, you haven't left your house in how long?
That's a good point.
Been through the entire pandemic? Now insert yourself into a city that has so many people in it.
Yeah.
I went for a walk today, and I'm not sure that I wanted to.
It can be weird, right? Where you have
experience this. Well, and it's like social anxiety.
Yeah, and it's disassociative, and it's all these other things.
Proximity alerts everywhere. It's just if I was a machine, I would have short circuited a long time ago.
For sure.
The second I walk out of the building, it's like.
Yeah. That the drone from the casinos and all the machines going was interesting, and I always found it a little bit depressing whenever I visited Nevada. I imagine it probably has a whole different resonance and probably sounds a lot different to you during the current times.
Nevada itself, I love.
Yeah,
I love the desert.
Yeah.
I mean, from Utah, half of our state is desert.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate the desert. And I don't know how accurate those stats are, but I am going to say we have desert, and I've been there, and it's lovely. And I appreciate drives, and I really appreciate the drive to and from Los Angeles, Salt Lake to Los Angeles. I haven't done it for a long time, but drove through a pretty epic thunderstorm.
Yeah, happens from time to time. And it's
I'm gonna actually shut it off though.
Okay.
Just so that because I mean it's and like I'm getting messages like crazy.
Nice.
How dare they? Okay. It is now silenced. We should be good to continue.
Nice and done. Yeah, there's like this there's this meditation behind like being in this part of the country, and it's the whole fear and loathing thing, the whole thing about traversing, the whole thing about meditation, the whole thing about different sounds, different environments hitting you, is not only a constant of life for people who are nomadic in lifestyle or by occupation. But it's also a bit of a subject that comes into play when we're. It's also a subject that comes into play when we look at today's selection. We are going to be. My pleasure. We are going to be talking about a film that resonated with me, really rather personally, and one that I'm so happy that we're able to crack open and talk about. It is not only a movie that encompasses an incredible amount of sound design, but it's not so much the music that you had to listen to so much as the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about Sound of Metal.
You sound great.
Yeah, right.
What? You told me you weren't feeling it? You were in it.
We don't need to put them all out.
I know, but we just need to film.
Your hearing is deteriorating rapidly.
We'll come back. Till then, Lou, we just keep going, okay?
No.
Lou,
No.
let's play tomorrow. Let's see what it's like, okay? I'm gonna be like a click track. You can play to me.
You have to understand, your first responsibility is to preserve the hearing you have.
I can't hear you. Do you understand me? I can't. I'm deaf. I'm deaf.
I found a place.
I think it's important that you stay here with us right now, Ruben. We're looking for a solution to this. Not this.
I need you to wait for me, okay? You're it for me, Lou. You're my heart. You're it for me, okay? You gotta wait for me. Trying to save my life.
Ruben, the world does keep moving. It can be a damn cruel place. But those moments of stillness, when this crappy, mundane world suddenly becomes radiant and magnificent, all the fear is gone. That place will never abandon you.
And we're back. Guys, that is Sound of Metal, an Amazon original starring an incredible cast and going through one man's journey through just a change of life and just the acceptance of what it means to have your whole world change when it comes to being, how can I put this, differently abled in a way that forces the main character to accept things that he didn't even realize he was able of accepting before. From the IMDb synopsis, Amazon original, Sound of Metal, a heavy metal drummer's life is thrown into freefall when he begins to lose his hearing. This movie, once more, was an Amazon original movie. It was directed by Darius Marder, screenplay by Marder, and also by, I believe, his brother, Abraham Marder. And it starred really an incredible amount of independent actors, people from the deaf community have never acted before, and also people who have been present in blockbuster movies, especially with Riz Ahmed. He plays the main character, Ruben, who is going through this process of becoming a member of the deaf community. We open up with this movie where Ruben and his partner, Lou, played by Olivia Cook, are on tour as a two-part heavy metal band. Ruben being the rhythm section, throwing down with drums, and Lou offering the vocals and guitar. Really going through like this modernist kind of, I wouldn't call it like slash metal. I'm just going to use general terms when it comes to it, like a heavy metal scene. And the band that they've made has become pretty popular. They have their own merchandise. They're going around the state tour. They apparently had enough to buy a wicked Winnebago, and they're just touring the country, playing music, living in it, and just doing what they can. After one of these performances, Ruben begins to lose his hearing, and not in like a way that some of us may be familiar with. I think as you grow older as an adult, everybody's used to get that little ring in your ear after you've been to a heavy, well, me personally, after I've been to a heavy metal concert or any concert. Not a lot of concert going nowadays, but I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with that sensation where it feels like there's a tuning fork going off inside your head, which has now become pretty common nowadays with people suffering from tinnitus. Me definitely being one of those individuals. What happens with Ruben is that he's not only going through and trying to fight the fact that his hearing has left him, but he's also trying to find a solution and reclaim what he had lost. Being a musician and losing your hearing, it's like losing an arm or a leg or something. It's just as debilitating. And we find out through the story that Ruben is not only trying to find a way to accept what happened to him, but he's also trying to find a way in which the changes that he is forced to make totally against his own choice when it comes to his own appreciation for his life have to be altered. And finally, when it comes to his acceptance towards the end of the movie about his situation and who he is and what he is now, it ends up being a really beautiful story. Also, by the way,
spoiler alerts! Spoiler alerts!
In case you guys haven't realized this, after the past couple of, I don't know how long we've been recording, a few minutes. This is going to be a spoiler-heavy episode. We do not believe in, saving it for you guys to find out about it here. Watch the film and then come back and let us know what you think. And that you can find out over here. So we were talking about this at length, Andres, because really towards the end of 2019, when this movie was beginning to get produced, and then when it was ramping up with major distribution with Amazon and getting some eyes on it and that kind of thing, wonderful independent feature, going through with a large cast of people who may have been known with a few things outside of Ahmed. We have a number of people who I've never seen before. There's Lauren Widloff, Matthew Almeric, the Chelsea Lee playing a number of deaf individuals and members of the community that Ruben runs into where he learns sign language. Some of the interesting things about this whole thing that popped up. In January, production began on this film in 2016, and it was announced at first that Dakota Johnson and Matthias Schoenaerts had joined the cast on the film with Darius Marder directing. Dakota Johnson, of course, being an actress who has done many a feature, and Matthias being the main character in The Mustang, another feature film that we looked at in previous episodes. Both incredible actors. In July 2018, it was then announced that Riz Ahmed and Olivia Cook had joined the cast of the film, replacing Johnson and Schoenaerts alongside Matthew Almeric. A large number of casts from both independent features and also members of the deaf community were joined in. And this I found really interesting. To prepare for the film, Ahmed took 6 months, of drum lessons, and he learned American Sign Language. The real victory about this film was the pre-production. Everything was set up, and the entire feature was shot in just 4 weeks. A month of very long days, changes in location, and you can see this as being really the kind of filmmaking that I really gravitate to. You can see the independent flavor behind it. You can see the fact that these were definitely people who had a limited amount of time, but an exorbitant amount of resources when it came to talent and when it came to problem solving. I've been talking for a minute, and it takes me a little bit of time to kind of organize my thoughts on this because this movie really hit me pretty hard, Andres. I'll be honest. When you first saw this, what was going through your head in regards to like the way that it was looking, the way that it felt? I mean, in the past, you and I both have talked about what that quote unquote independent look is, on film. Do you think that this particular one had it? I thought it did, but what do you think? How did it flow?
100%. I thought that everything about it was independent, in its truest sense. I don't know if a studio backed it, but it certainly didn't feel like it.
Yeah.
I was so blown away by the performances in there. I mean, he not only learned how to do ASL sign language, he also learned how to drum.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show with time after.
Time isn't on our side. It looks like he froze up a bit. You were saying? Oh. Sorry, go ahead.
It didn't freeze up on my side.
Sorry about that. But you're mentioning that, you're absolutely right. With enough time and with enough, I don't know, focus, I guess. There's so many opaque terms that I could use to describe. Oh man, they worked hard. Everybody, the crew, the cast, they just put this thing together. And it just definitely does go to show, like you're mentioning, preparation is the key. I mean, when you have a production that begins development 3 years before day one and the shoots start going, I mean, it speaks to that. And there's definitely a question as to why that comes into play. A lot of independent features deal with being dead in production. A lot of productions deal with being dead in production, where that's the situation where people are talking about making it. There's a screenplay made. You're trying to line up actors, line up theaters. It's all pre-production, but nothing really clicks and you can't get it going. I have a slight feeling that this movie may have been dealing with that just a little bit ahead of time. But I'm so very glad that even though the first thoughts of this and the first announcements of cast being rolled out, production teams being organized happened 3 years before they began, excuse me, the major photography, it ended up being a really well received movie, and I absolutely agree with it. I can barely talk right now. I'm trying to remember what it was like seeing this movie for the first time, going through a couple things, and honestly, just I'm blown away by. I don't remember really being impressed so much as an audio engineer when it came to a film like this since I saw Dunkirk a couple years back, where just the silence was used so well. Here, I mean, I could talk about the entire, and I probably will. I'll talk about how obviously, because of the subject matter, how competent the sound design had to be. Everything from the practical to the original soundtrack to the score, it had to be a situation where everything was just so tight and realistic. We've talked about on so many occasions where it comes to different genres of movies, how there's a lot of wiggle room in the sound department, where we've talked about in sci-fi, fantasy, even some things where you're trying to maybe push the envelope a little bit, adventure, that kind of stuff. How when it comes to the palette that you have to use from a sound designing perspective, you get so much, you can actually lean on that a little bit. It was so important in this movie for everything to be so sharp, to diamond cut so much, from the scenes of when we have Ruben beginning to go through his hearing loss, to the scenes where he gets his cochlear implant and we are given an idea of what his hearing was before, what he was expecting his hearing to return to, and how he's crushed when he realizes that it's nothing like he thought it was going to be after undergoing major surgery to get the cochlear implant put into his head. Cochlear implant, for those who don't know, is a small electronic device that is that electrically stimulates the cochlear nerve. That's the nerve we have in our heads for hearing. The implant has external and internal parts, where the external part sits behind the ear. It picks up sound to the microphone and then processes the sound and transmits it into the internal part of the implant. So we go through the story. What did you think of the pacing when it came to things with this? I thought it was paced very well. I think it may have lagged towards the end of the third act after Ruben got his procedure done. Was there anything jarring to you when it came to the way that this was presented when it came to the first, the second, and the third act?
No, I don't know that I would call it a perfect movie, but It was incredible all the way through. I'm trying to remember if there was any issues I felt because of the lack of sound versus pacing issues from a story or
Sure.
plot perspective.
Sure.
And I can't think of any. I just remembered being on this journey, and I was fascinated the entire time. I was drawn in the entire time.
Yeah, it's a
And
very.
the sound design was a big part of that.
We talk about how we talked about this like when we were talking about The Assistant with Sue, and how New York had to have its own space in the movie because it was a character in the movie. And I understand how that can be kind of like a lazy term to say. It's like, oh, well, New York is its own character, or, you know, the car is its own character, or whatever. But to your point, this movie obviously, and again, it's because of the subject matter, but also it's because of the competency in which it's presented to us from an audible standpoint. This movie has a huge cast, and one of them that has to take center stage, that is Riz Ahmed's co-star in this, absolutely is the sound design. Ruben is going through this alteration into who he is. This part of his physiology is wired directly into his soul. And when he no longer has the capability of being able to process that, part of his soul dies. And to Riz Ahmed's talent, and to his credit, he does such a wonderful job of playing the immense amount of anger that a person would feel in that regard so subtly. There are these scenes where he is sitting over from Paul Raci, who played Joe, and he has these conversations with him where Joe is talking to Ruben and saying that I don't think that being deaf is a handicap. And that's the physiology, that's the psychology that I put into play when it comes to helping people. Later in the movie, we see that Ruben, after going through and getting his diagnosis from a doctor in some town that he's never been in, that they happen to be that he and Lou happen to be touring in, nightmare, by the way, to be in a strange place and you end up being debilitated like this. He gets some advice from a doctor who's kind enough to tell him that there is a clinic in which Joe, being a Vietnam veteran who lost his hearing during the war, has a capability to read lips, and who's also a counselor, has set up a kind of like a halfway house for the deaf. When he opens up his doors and allows Ruben to come in, and treats him like a stranger at first, but later takes him in because Ruben, during the second act, is able to accept what happened to him with the help of some deaf kids at a kindergarten, and also some capabilities when it comes to his acceptance of what happened. He throws it away when he gets the cochlear implant, and much to the dismay of myself, and I think to a lot of other audience members, Joe, because he is so steadfast in what he believes to be the correct way to process loss, to process deafness, he has to kick Ruben out because it's just part of his code, it's part of what he believes is appropriate. And then Ruben is left by himself once more. And that's one thing that really kind of hit me when it came to this. Ruben is so very alone throughout this movie. Did you pick up on that, or am I kind of reading into it a little bit too much?
Well, I think that's his perspective for sure, but I don't know that I would agree to say that he was so alone, because he was never alone.
Okay.
In my perspective, he always had somebody there with him, but his solitude was self-induced.
It was self-induced a lot, yeah.
Self-inflicted. And I think a lot of that has to do with the addiction side of what the story is.
That's right.
Because it was still another self-sabotage from my perspective as far as everything that he did.
Yeah. And we hear that when Joe first interviews him, Ruben does confess that, yeah, I'm clean now, but he was a heroin addict and he'd been sober for 2 years. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
And there was such an element to the world of being an addict and staying sober throughout the whole idea of what the story was for me. So that side of it I found fascinating as well. But
absolutely,
I really do. I think that his perspective of being alone was mostly self-inflicted, because he had so many people helping him along the way that were very generous.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, he was very lucky to have landed in the town that he did and to have gotten the help that he did, for sure. I did get angry at Ruben on more than one occasion where he had people who were here who were willing to open their arms to him and show him how there can be beauty and there can be efficiency and there can be self-sustaining acceptance despite the fact that he was dealing with a disability. And then he throws it away because he thinks he knows better than they do. And that did make me angry at him. But it's definitely, I think that's what movies are supposed to do sometimes. You're not supposed to like everybody. You're supposed to have context, and you're supposed to have conflict. And this movie does that so very well. I was definitely put into a conundrum because I felt so sorry for Ruben. And I also felt so angry at him for pushing people away when he did.
Yeah.
I still stand by my opinion that he was alone, regardless of being self-inflicted. He definitely found himself by himself in the beginning, and also like towards the end when he finally gained acceptance and he was able to actually enjoy the silence for a bit. But I can understand that's how do you think they like? I have a tough time trying to think of another way in which I would be able to myself think of an idea how this character could have dealt differently with the trauma. Do you think that they handled that responsibly? Do you think they respected what this character was going through?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going on the journey that we went on with Ruben was, I think, that situation is. I really do.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would call it a perfect movie, but I think that I can't see another way to do it.
Yeah.
For what Ruben was going through. I think as far as if this was a love story, it would be a different situation because I think that, or a happy ending love story. I don't know how to say what I want to say with that because it is a love story, but
it is a love story. Like Ruben and Lou definitely have a codependent relationship, and they definitely have a beautiful relationship. I broke down into tears when Ruben was talking to Lou in the last scene when they're in bed the night prior, and he just starts crying to her, and he says that she saved his life, and she says that he saved hers, and that was the time that I knew that it was okay. Well, now it's time to go. But also I was happy about it because I realized that Ruben had accepted his fate, and that now was the time for him to start working on it and surviving in this new part of his life. And then they parted ways. They broke up after that. And what's really interesting about that, I think, is that Lou was the main catalyst throughout the first and second act for Ruben to try and do his best to get his hearing back, to get back to his girlfriend, to start touring again. And then Cook and Ahmed played it so beautifully when they're both just looking into each other's eyes and they both break down. And it's a very beautiful scene. But.
Well, and the crazy thing for me is like, even though they were set up as the couple at the beginning, I was actually fighting for Ruben and Diane to get together.
Really? That's interesting. Diane played by Lauren Ridloff. Yeah.
Yeah, and Lauren did such a fantastic job. I'm not super familiar with her work. I did watch The Walking Dead, which she was in.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen work, and I think that she is a very, very solid actor.
She's very accomplished. She was great in The Walking Dead. She was also in what was this? Another independent film. If you could hear my own tune. She also is going to be in the upcoming Eternals for the next phase of Marvel coming up this year. So you know that when you're able to handle like really heavy, heavily produced and very popular series like that she has to have chops in order to pull it off. I mean, everybody has to who's in those productions. But I understand where you're coming through. That kind of, I think I was so focused on Lou and Ruben, and that I was just hoping so badly that they would find themselves they would find themselves again, even though they were different people now. Lou goes through her own metamorphosis as well.
Right.
She goes back home. She ends up, kind of improving her relationship with her father, who apparently is a very well-off individual. And she starts moving into this different part of her life where she's accepted and she's loved by another person.
And what I would say to that is that was part of him leaving and the idea of their codependent relationship dissolving or transitioning, or
like an addiction, really.
Well, yeah, and I think that both of them ended and then they were together, which is why it was such a tragedy.
It was. I mean, I think that's something that resonates with people too. Like, a lot of people who are maybe listening to the show or maybe seen this movie have been in that situation where, despite how as hard as you might fight to stay in a relationship or keep in touch with somebody or keep doing a certain thing, sometimes it's just not in the cards. And it ends up being, you end up becoming a better person after mitigating that loss. And I think that's what happened during the last few minutes of this film, which really kind of hit me hard.
Yeah. I loved their love story because it wasn't a happy ending traditional love story.
Yeah.
It was a true love story from beginning to end for me.
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. That's a great point.
And the way that they ended, spoiler alert, their relationship was so beautifully done because it was amicable and it was shared and it was very much practical and grounded in the reality of what it was.
We forget that when it comes to, like, stories that are told in Hollywood and told through the rose-colored glasses of cinema and whatnot. Loving somebody isn't necessarily going through the good times. Loving somebody is suffering with them, and I think that was, I think you hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah, I think also just understanding when it's over, and it's okay to move on and support each other to move on.
Let's talk about how the scenes we're going through, because this is definitely a movie where, though it did make use of urban environments a lot, most of it was shot with that Winnebago out in the back of a lot where that looked like, I don't know, something from War and Peace or some other kind of Southern Gothic that was popping up. Mm-hmm. I think that not only was, and this is something that I'm finding out a lot more now that I've gotten to get a look at it, where the scenes, like the physical scenes, and we talked about this with Bert when we were talking about Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, how the scenery was a genuine reflection of the turmoil the characters are going through. Like they were actually trapped in the situation they were getting into. I think that this movie did a not as good a job as that, but I could definitely start seeing the ways in which, like the scenes when Ruben is on his way to recovery and he sells all of his stuff out of the Winnebago. He's cleaning shop. He's getting rid of stuff, even though the goal isn't the same to recovery. It's so that he can, maybe in a way it is, because he is using it to get money for his cochlear implants. Mm-hmm. But there's that scene that comes through. It's powerful. Listen, I'm an audio geek. I have gear that's doing nothing but collecting dust that I haven't used for years. You'd have to rip off my right arm before I sell that stuff. So I resonate with the idea of this rock and roller who made his money by being a heavy metal drummer, cleaning house by selling all of his gear, selling his ride, and moving forward. At the time, it wasn't for the right reasons, but at the very least, he was restructuring things, and the scene gets restructured. Mm-hmm. Do you think that happened smoothly in this movie, or was it like more of like kind of like this abrupt kind of switching of scenes that was just doing it for the sake of a change of scenery?
Honestly, none of that bothered me, like or stood out, or I don't have an opinion on any of that really, because the sound stood out in so many other places, or the lack of sound stood out in so many other places. So for me, that wasn't an issue.
Well, the sound was just so ridiculously good in this movie. I mean, I just reacted to this movie on so many levels. It's no secret, and we've talked about it on the podcast before, but I've been doing audio for not as heavily as I was with doing in my 20s and 30s, but I've been either a freelance or a hobbyist when it comes to audio engineering for over 20 years now, and you pay a price. And I've paid that price. I haven't dealt with deafness, luckily, and I do what I can to, keep my hearing at a healthy level. I get my ears checked for my physicals. I go through the test. I do all this other kind of stuff. But I've lost some of my hearing capability over the years, and it's because mistakes that I made when I was younger. It was because of prolonged ear strain. It's because of bad editing techniques I didn't know about before. And when I can tell you, like, really just honest truth, the idea of going through what Ruben went through is horrifying to me. It is very scary. And just the way in which that dread starts hitting you when such a meticulous and such a competent way of doing simple fades and EQ that's detrimental to like the overall sound scheme. Like, you know, the way in which that they tackle Ruben's deafness is a smart, beautiful thing. They start taking out low band EQ, they start putting in like high ends, and they start fading it out. They start putting in like that horrifying like tinnitus sound that plays over his dialogue. They dumb down the dialogue so that it sounds like he's talking through mud, which you can do by just killing the mid and the highs and raising the low end. And then when he gets the cochlear implant and he starts hearing these new ears for the first time, and you see the look on his face, it's beautiful and it's horrifying at the same time. It is ridiculously competent from a sound perspective, and I was just blown away. And we'll touch on that a little bit towards the end of the episode when we get to our specialities. But did you feel that same way? Because I felt dread. Like I got a cold icicle in my stomach when I was able to see what Ruben was going through. Do you think that resonated with you? And do you think that resonated with people who, you know, may not have any hearing problems or may not be in the biz or whatever?
Well, I mean, the profession that I'm in, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, eyes, ears, body, every bit of you.
It all has to work.
Part of a tool, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you do have movies like this that do champion people that are considered people with disabilities. I don't know that they would be so quick to call it that.
For sure.
Maybe it's a superhero trait where all of their other abilities are enhanced because of the loss of one of them.
That's true. Like,
but
go ahead. No, please.
I was just going to say, I found it to be very, very interesting because I believed Paul as Joe 100. Oh
yeah, no question.
And he's not. He's a member of the deaf community, but not as himself.
Yeah.
He's part of a group, parent with children. I can't find it right now. Of course, I had it up at one point, and now I can't see where it is. But Lauren is deaf, and just the fact that she's made a career out of that. I mean, go back to Marlee Matlin. You know,
absolutely.
There's so many people in the history of film work that have done amazing, brilliant, wonderful, acceptable, proficient performances.
It's awe-inspiring. It really is.
Yeah. So, I mean, just the communication is the biggest one for me. Is there's such a communication requirement for being on set and having conversations with directors and producers and fellow actors and anybody else on set.
Just in pushing your own brand
so
too.
Necessary that having that additional challenge for another level of communication or to take it even further, it makes it more complicated. So hats off to anybody that can do it.
It's amazing.
With the quality of work that we received with this movie. It's terrific.
I really love the way too that they didn't how can I put this? They didn't make the deafness, for lack of a better term. I'm sorry if I'm being insensitive to anybody who may have family in that community. But when they don't make it so, they don't make it abhorrent. You know, they don't make it like Ruben's losing his hearing. They handle it practically. They introduce this cast of characters: Gene, Shaheem, Harlan, and the Man, played by Chelsea Lee, Shaheem Sanchez, Chris Perfetti, and Bill Thorpe, who are members of Joe's entourage in the house. And through Joe's counsel, by just upkeeping the house, and through finding a way to communicate with each other, some have limited capabilities when it comes to ASL. Some are, masters at it. They have dinners at the table, and it's these beautiful scenes where somebody who can hear, I think I found it kind of abrupt because they'd be hitting the table so that the vibrations would come out the table and people would be able to look up and listen. And then you see them using the signs and using what verbal capabilities they have to communicate. It's this beautiful thing. But that's what they did. They made it a thing of beauty. They really, I think that if the second act of this movie was a person, it absolutely would be Joe, and it wouldn't consider deafness a handicap, And I think that was so profound because it was done through a way that was subtle, and most importantly, it took the needs and the concerns of this community seriously. It went through and it provided it through a rational narrative. I didn't miss a beat when it came to these beautiful scenes where Ruben was having one-on-ones with Chelsea Lee's character Jen when he was giving her a tattoo and he was asking her to get his gear out to the nearby town and sell it. When Bill Thorpe was the man was was Ruben's roommate, and they had a brief conversation about what to do when it came to making your bed and all this other stuff. I mean, it's a story about a man who happens to be deaf. It isn't a story about being deaf, if that makes sense. And it was just respected so well, and it didn't break the narrative. We didn't have to fill in any empty gaps in this movie. Everybody had a reason. Everybody had a way to speak for themselves. Was there ever a time you were going through this and you were worried that they were going to do make fun of people who were dealing with this challenge, or worried that they would handle it in a way that might not be sensitive to the audience they're trying to reach out to?
No, and I would be shocked if that was the outcome, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, if this was a parody, maybe I could see it where that would go to levels of being offensive and insensitive and everything else, but it's not. It's the story about a man that's going through something that has to deal with, and it's about the people in his life and the people that become part of his life. So,
right.
Yeah, no, I just thought it was beautifully told, beautifully put together. And I mean, if there's another character in here, it's just emotion in general and how impactful and affecting it can be, because that's what I got from this.
Everybody did such a good job of being subtle in the right way, and then being angry in the right. There's a beautiful scene too as we begin the third act after Ruben gets his cochlear implant, where he and Joe talk and Ruben tells him what's going on. We touched on it a little bit earlier in the episode, and you see the emotion behind Paul Raci's eyes. And I mean, good God, I know this guy. I think this might be his first acting gig. Maybe not.
No, he's
been okay. That speaks to that. He's been see that's my own distance from it, I guess. Paul has been working for a very long time, and he has been doing an incredible job. And so it speaks to that. Where, I mean, the man speaks so much with just his eyes and obviously with his hands and everything, being a member of the deaf community. But that scene where Ruben tells him the truth, and it's after Joe has offered him a permanent place in the foundation to help. There's a lot of heartbreak in this movie, but it's just handled so well. I mean, you see how Joe's heart breaks when Ruben has to go. You see how Lou's heart breaks when Ruben has to go. There's this ongoing theme about, yes, Ruben not being alone, but he's so destructive when it comes to the people who are trying to reach out to him. Do you think that's a regular theme? I mean, and I think that was probably, an addict personality coming through.
Yeah, it goes back to him being an addict, and his new addiction certainly was Olivia's character Lou.
Yeah,
and then it became the cochlear implant. So I mean, there was always something for him to be committed to as far as being an addict, but but on the healthy side of it, as a replacement for that, and then it was the implant. It was whatever mission was next, I think. But man, the scene where he separated from Lou in order to join the group house, sober house. I was just like, I know people, and it's such familiar territory as far as how that scene was, not only how it felt, how it was edited. Yeah. It just felt so incredibly real that it was brutal to get through.
I think that speaks about their own
And
personal
I was so
experience.
empathetic. I
Yeah.
was so empathetic towards Ruben for it.
You almost
I was
forgive him
so-
for being such a jerk.
Well, and honestly, I don't think he was being jerk. I think he was being selfish, which goes to
Yeah.
the idea of him being an addict.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was being a jerk. I think he was being desperate. I think he was being.
Okay, I read it differently, but I can see what you would think about for sure. He's like, this can't be happening, this can't be happening. But then if he actually commits towards stepping into this world, it means that that's his new reality, and he's forced to do it. It can be terrifying for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But
I think that that definitely speaks to being in Utah as well. I mean, you lived here a lot longer than I have, and though even in the amount of time that I've lived here, you see addiction in Salt Lake. There is a huge drug problem here.
it's, I mean, if you want to talk about the world that we live in, as far as it being a pandemic,
Yeah,
so is every other. Yeah, I mean, there's a pandemic around every corner.
yeah,
It's
that's
just
true.
maybe not so contagious.
Yeah. I feel you. I mean, and that's something too. We don't want to get too dark with it, but this movie does get dark. The way in which it still has the capability of being enjoyed, though, is that it respects the depression, and it respects the way in which people earnestly, these characters, profess themselves to Ruben and how they're willing to help him. But then also coming to realize that they're willing to let him go too, which in and of itself is a beautiful thing. It really is just this excellent way of storytelling. It's this. I still think about it. And it's definitely been going around in my head more since we both decided earlier to talk about it. How this just encapsulates. I'm gonna get on my philosophical soapbox a little bit, but. For those of you guys who don't know, there's a lot of theories that come into play when it comes to the way in which a story in a movie is made, the way in which literature or whatever. There's a lot of different schools of thought in regards to man versus nature, man versus woman, man versus God, man versus man, that kind of stuff. There's the hero's journey. There's the 3-act play. I'm using quotes, and we talked about that with previous stuff. This is definitely a situation where we have a classic workup of man versus man, wherein, and also a little bit of the hero's journey too, but not as prolific as you would with something like in a science fiction genre or Star Wars or action adventure or whatever. Ruben's worst enemy is himself, and regardless of how he is able to save himself at the end, he is the person who is in charge. He is the person who is who has the responsibility to accept what's happened to him and ultimately move on. And seeing how he has to mourn his loss of hearing the same way that he would mourn a loved one, the same way that he would mourn somebody. He goes through the different parts of accepting the death. He has anger, he has acceptance, he has depression. He goes through all of it. He tries to find a way out, which fails, but then ultimately is able to deal with it during this beautiful scene at the end where he remembers a quote that Joe told him, and I'm paraphrasing, where he says the way in which Joe said that the way in which he was able to accept his own deafness was that he had the capability to be in complete silence. And in those times, he believed that that's when he was his closest to God. And the beautiful thing about this movie is that that's reflected in Ruben takes his mentor's words and he lives through them in the last scene where we see Riz Ahmed sitting in a busy intersection, and the cochlear implant is working as it's supposed to. The processors are working, there's traffic all over, but it ends up with Ruben just hearing a lot of white noise because he hasn't learned how to use these new ears yet, and it's painful for him. He takes them off, and he sits on a bench, and he just communes with maybe God, maybe the universe or whatever, and that's where the movie ends, with us looking at Riz Ahmed's pensive face, accepting his fate, realizing what has to happen next, and there's no music, there's no sound, there's nothing. Cut to credits. I was blown away by the storytelling in this. Do you think this could have been a situation where they veered too closely to man versus man, or was this really Ruben's story, or was it a story in which it was about just the deaf community? How was this movie?
It was Ruben's story for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any question about that. It was definitely. from his perspective and his story from beginning to end.
What was the thing that resonated to you about his character the most? Like, we've talked about his addictive personality, we've talked about his fight for redemption for himself. What do you think was the thing that really popped off for you when
Honestly, it was the fight. I mean, he was a fighter from the very beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw him fight through his performances. We saw him fight through the beginning of his hearing loss. We saw him fight through learning how to sign, how to be a part of the community that he ends up being, fighting that, but going for the implant, fighting that,
getting the money for it,
fighting that. I mean, it was an anthem of fighting for sure. I think that, it's his story. It's a story about perseverance. It's a story about the fight put into something and acceptance. It's so full of acceptance.
Yeah.
I mean, the last scene for me is him accepting his fate or accepting his challenge, or however you want to put it, circumstance.
Yeah, I agree.
Accepting Joe's words.
That's
accepting
it.
God, accepting all of it. There's so many things in there. So many.
Well, hopefully, I like to think that Ruben would carry on, and that he would definitely be able to really understand what Joe meant when he said that it's not a handicap. And I'm hoping that, in my own head, that Ruben's able to be happy and that he's able to, balance life with these new steps that he has to take.
So you tell me, how did it end? What did you think the story was about? Do you think that was his acceptance, or do you think it was something else?
I do think it was his acceptance. And I think that what really came out to me was, like we mentioned before, the scene with him and Lou, and they are able to call it quits. Because Lou was Ruben's lighthouse throughout this entire thing. And you touched on that brilliantly, where we have her not only being, his one of his many addictions, but also his preservation. And also, I don't think Ruben liked himself very much, and I think that he believed that Lou was the one good thing that was about him, that he had. And I think that when they were able to finally leave each other, they realized that not only were they enough because their partner thought they were enough because they thought they were enough. It was self-acceptance, and they were able to move forward with that. So that was definitely an emotional. That the entire last 5 minutes is just a roller coaster where I'm just sitting there, there's tears coming down my face, and I'm just so impressed by the performances. And then the way that it ends, it was absolutely acceptance. It was acceptance that was pushed because of desperation, because he has nowhere else to go. You either keep sitting on that bench and die, or you listen to the silence and then you carry on. And I like to think that Ruben carried on.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that, had we not had the scene with Lou, the ending's very different.
Oh, totally. Oh, it's a totally different story. Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the storytelling in there too. So I really think it's a very peaceful, very beautiful, very happy ending.
Yeah.
Because I think he goes back to the community, and I think that he accepts who he is in that community.
I agree.
And then he ends up with Lauren's character, Diane.
And they end up teaching kids sign language.
They end up teaching kids how to sign.
And how to drum heavy metal and stuff too.
Wonderful. It's so great. And apparently that scene was improv.
Really? That's impressive.
The drumming circle with the kids.
Yeah.
That's how good Riz is. You
wow.
know. So I'm gonna go just right into it since I'm talking about it.
Let's talk about specialties. Go for it.
I think that anytime you have actors that are real people with I think the sober house and the deaf community.
Yeah.
Because just because of people not knowing protocols and stuff like that on set and things like that.
Yeah.
I didn't feel any of that in this whatsoever.
It was smooth, super smooth.
A really great movie.
Yeah.
It had every element that it needed, and I think that everybody supported it. Everybody else, as far as the actors, brilliantly.
Yeah.
I didn't find a weak link in it with the acting. Joe was the dark horse that won me over for sure.
Yeah, I can respect that completely.
I'll bet on him any day of the week. Paul was terrific.
Super good.
I'm excited to see more things that come about from Paul Raci.
For sure. And just a great way to have a competent and beautiful film to represent the deaf community, I think, is really a statement in of itself.
I fell in love with Olivia during Bates Motel.
Oh, yeah.
Bates Motel. I think she is terrific.
Yeah.
So I am really excited to see what she does moving forward.
I'm going to ask you a pretty heavy question in that regard too, because
do
I was we shared that at the beginning of the episode how the mains were going to be played by Dakota Johnson and Matthias Schoenaerts.
Oh, okay.
So two very capable, very competent actors, but
totally different movie.
Totally different movie. Okay.
No,
I thought you were going to say that.
No, this is a much better movie for the actors that were in it because with the other two actors, I can see them doing a great job. I'm not the biggest Dakota Johnson fan.
I gotcha. That's okay.
I'm sorry, Dakota. I want to see more of your work, and I want to see you really bring it and do all of the amazing things that actors do. So don't hold that against me if I ever talk about how wonderful you are in the future.
Of course.
But honestly, I don't know what her performance would have been in this. And I'm really sad that she didn't get the opportunity to do so. However, I'm very excited that Olivia did.
Yeah, I can respect
Olivia
that.
Was terrific.
Yeah.
And Riz, terrific. Like everybody did. I want to find a movie where I can just trash the actors, dude. That's what I want. Because I can't trash the actors.
Right. We weren't even able to do it on Peppermint. On Peppermint, it was just bad writing, but the actors were doing great.
I know. I couldn't even do it then. I could do it for some of them. I couldn't do it for all of them.
I feel you.
Jennifer Garner, you're my girl.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I want to work with you in the future if you listen. If you're one of our 13 listeners.
It could happen. I think that
what about your sound?
I'm so happy you asked. I'm so happy you asked. If there's anybody out there, and maybe there's a 13 people that listen to us from time to time, but if you're listening to this episode out there in the interwebs by mistake, first of all, hi, I'm Mike. This is Anders. Pleasure to meet you. And if you happen to have any kind of interest in sound, yes, music, yes, but ultimately in post-production audio or any kind of mixing capabilities when it comes to films or whatever, you need to take out a notepad. You need to watch this movie no less than 10 times, and you need to take as many notes as you possibly can. This movie is an audio achievement. It is an absolutely minimalist way of just ridiculous competency and creativity, and it's a masterclass in how to do things right when it comes to a limited purview from a creative standpoint. I will never stop saying this. It depends upon the palette that you have, and that is definitely determined by the genre of the movie that you're going to make. And when you have a huge palette, that is such an opportunity to do really cool things, but it's also an opportunity to get lazy. And when we're dealing with a production like this, where we have absolute specific ways in which these characters are dealing with challenges, surgeries, technology, that can be limiting, but it can also be freeing if it's done with competency. I'm not exactly sure what kind of research the audio department did when it came to getting this stuff taken care of. And specifically when it comes to, the sound department, that's everything from, the boom mixer to ADR and Foley and that kind of stuff. But when we take a look at the sound department for this movie and we look at, all these names that are popping up that I'm not familiar with, but due to the fact that they, touched this and they were able to open up my mind to how these real life frustrations and problems and technical strata can be represented through a sound engineer's capability. I'm absolutely humbled, and I might be like going way too far and being way dramatic, but this, not only because of the subject matter for what Ruben was going through, but just the way in which the real life stuff that was happening was respected from an audible standpoint. I got very emotional watching this film. I got very emotional because it's something that I've gone through in smaller degrees, and just the respect for it, and just the damned competency for the way in which they just affected the way Ruben was hearing and how we were able to share that dismay and share that horror, but also share that joy in a lot as well. It was so good. It was so good. I have no idea how it could be better. I really don't. If this movie does not get some sort of look, maybe an Oscar nod or something like that when it comes to sound design or audio production or whatever, I will be disappointed, honestly. It's number one. It's absolutely number one in that respect for me.
I'm pretty sure it will. Some of the research that I did on it said that they were pushing for Olivia to be Best Actress or Supporting Actress or something like that. So I don't doubt that the sound design is going to be one of the things that, I mean, because it's such a heavy character for what this project is. So.
Well, it's his co-star. I mean, we mentioned it before. The audio is Ruben's co-star.
It's fantastic. So question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's a very important question for you.
Oh dear.
Are you ready for it?
Lay it on me.
Okay, so back in
At Andres? Oh my goodness. Hey, unmute yourself.
And that's how I discovered. That's how I discovered how to break into the business.
How to break into the business. Oh, I'm so happy that the secret was provided to us. You were giving me a panic attack. I'm kidding.
No, you're very welcome for that.
I think we'll call it a close with that.
I can't resist it. I don't know. I'm goofy.
I love you for it. It's beautiful. I think that it's a really good time then to kind of break off and remind everybody that, hey, if you want to be part of the conversation, then by all means, give us a nod. Go ahead and like, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud. Throw us an email, pullfocuspod@gmail.com. Let us know how we're doing. And honestly, give us a ring, not a ring. Let us know how we're doing. Because as you know, we may be wrong, but it's your job to tell us. And Andres, as always, even though you're even further away, I'm so very happy that you're able to take the time to come in and just, I don't know, talk, see what's going on.
Oh, come on. Yeah, no, this is what. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so very happy that I have I have the capability to be talking about like this. Honestly, this important film, and with somebody whose opinion that I really respect and whose friendship I really appreciate. Come back home, be safe, and we'll talk about the next one. We'll see what happens.
Indeed. Until next time, sir.
Same Pull Focus time. I'm stopping right now. That's enough. All right.
Same Pull Focus time. Same Pull Focus site.
How dare you?
Focus line.
How dare you? Okay, that's enough. We gotta go. You guys take care. We'll see you again. Bye.